Sarah's heart pounded as she stood in front of her closet, debating whether to go through with Lisa's outrageous dare. Lisa's voice echoed in her mind, "Come on, Sarah. Your life has been so boring since you married Tom. You need this." Reluctantly, Sarah grabbed a short black dress, a far cry from her usual conservative attire, and got ready for a night she hoped would break her out of the monotonous routine that had become her life. The frat house loomed large as she approached, already alive with the pulsating beat of loud music, laughter, and the unmistakable scent of alcohol. Sarah felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She was out of place here, a married woman surrounded by carefree college students. She hesitated at the entrance, but a friendly student named Mike noticed her hesitation and offered her a drink. His charming smile and the promise of excitement in his eyes made her accept it. As the night progressed, Sarah began to loosen up. The music, the laughter, and the camaraderie of the students around her started to melt her initial reservations. She danced, laughed, and for the first time in years, felt the exhilarating thrill of youth and freedom coursing through her veins. Mike stayed close, his presence reassuring and his interest in her unmistakable. Then, she caught the attention of a group of frat guys. They were loud, confident, and exuded a reckless energy that was both intoxicating and dangerous. They invited her to join them in a more private room, their eyes gleaming with mischief. Fueled by alcohol and the exhilarating sense of adventure, Sarah agreed, following them through a maze of hallways until they reached a locked room. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. The playful banter and flirtatious smiles turned into aggressive advances. Sarah's initial hesitation resurfaced, but the combination of alcohol and the exhilarating thrill of danger made her give in. She found herself responding to their touches, her resistance fading as she succumbed to the reckless energy that filled the room. What started as harmless fun quickly escalated. The guys took Sarah roughly, pushing her boundaries and crossing lines she had never imagined crossing. Her initial resistance vanished, replaced by a whirlwind of intense physicality. The thrill and danger consumed her, leaving her breathless and disoriented. The night ended with Sarah in a daze, her clothes disheveled and her mind a tumultuous storm of conflicting emotions. She slipped out of the frat house, trying to process what had just happened. She felt a confusing mix of guilt, excitement, and fear as she made her way home, the memory of the night etched into her mind. As Sarah walked back to her house, the reality of her actions began to sink in. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. The thrill of the night was replaced by a heavy sense of guilt and dread. How would she face Tom? How could she explain this to anyone? The questions swirled in her mind, unanswered and relentless. But beneath the guilt and fear, a small part of her still clung to the excitement and freedom she had felt. It was a dangerous feeling, one that threatened to pull her back into the whirlwind of reckless abandon. As she slipped into bed next to Tom, who was fast asleep, Sarah knew that her life had irrevocably changed. The night had awakened something in her, something she wasn't sure she could control. Sarah woke up with a pounding headache, the dull ache of a hangover and a gnawing sense of guilt gnawing at her gut. The previous night's events were a blur of fragmented memories and unsettling sensations. She glanced over at Tom, who was already up, his face buried in his laptop. The usual comfort of his presence now felt like a looming threat. She forced a smile and got up, hoping her shaky composure would go unnoticed. As the days passed, Sarah tried to slip back into her normal routine, but the memories of the frat house clung to her like a second skin. The excitement and danger she had felt that night were now overshadowed by a creeping dread. Her heart raced every time her phone buzzed, expecting the worst. And then it happened. A whisper in Tom's class, a passing comment from a student. The video. Sarah's worst fears crystallized into reality. The frat house incident had been recorded and was circulating among the students. Her stomach twisted into knots as she overheard snippets of conversation, the realization sinking in like a lead weight. Desperate and panicking, Sarah confided in Lisa. They met at a quiet cafe, and Sarah poured out the whole sordid tale. Lisa's shock was palpable, her eyes wide with disbelief. They brainstormed frantically, trying to devise a plan to find the video and destroy it before Tom could see it. Lisa suggested reaching out to the frat guys, hoping to reason with them. But before they could act, Sarah received a message from Steve, one of the frat guys. He had the video and was prepared to release it unless Sarah met his demands. The cold, calculated words on the screen sent a shiver down her spine. She felt trapped, cornered with no way out. Desperation pushed her to agree to meet him, praying she could somehow negotiate her way out of this nightmare. The first meeting took place in a secluded spot, away from prying eyes. Steve was there, his demeanor smug and menacing. He made it clear that he wanted more from her, using the video as leverage. The sense of helplessness was overwhelming, but Sarah saw no other choice. She agreed to his demands, feeling a piece of her dignity slip away. The second encounter was even worse. They met at a dingy motel, the atmosphere thick with tension. The encounter was rough and degrading, each moment chipping away at her resolve. Sarah complied, hoping this would be the last time, but deep down, she knew it was a vain hope. Her guilt intensified with each passing day. The secret weighed heavily on her, the fear of discovery gnawing at her sanity. She became paranoid, constantly checking her phone and emails for any sign of the video being released. Her relationship with Tom began to deteriorate, the distance between them growing with each anxious moment. Sarah's once comfortable life was unraveling, and she felt powerless to stop it. The facade of normalcy was cracking, and beneath it lay a turmoil that threatened to consume her. Sarah's attempts to maintain a semblance of normalcy around Tom were failing. He noticed her strange behavior, her constant anxiety, her tendency to jump at every notification on her phone. One evening, as they sat in silence at the dinner table, Tom finally voiced his concerns. "Sarah, what's going on? You've been acting so strange lately. Is it work? Something else?" Sarah's heart raced, but she forced a smile. "It's just stress from work. I'm sorry if I've been distant. It'll get better, I promise." Tom's suspicion didn't dissipate, but he let the matter drop for the moment. Sarah felt a temporary relief, knowing she had deflected his concerns, but the dread of the truth surfacing lingered. Steve's demands grew relentless. He started asking for more frequent meetings, each one more degrading than the last. Sarah was pushed to her breaking point, but the fear of the video being released kept her compliant. The humiliation was unbearable, but she felt trapped, with no way out. Then, Jake entered the picture. Another frat guy who also had access to the video, and he started making his own demands. The web of deceit tightened around Sarah, suffocating her. She was now caught between multiple blackmailers, each one pushing her further into despair. Sarah's mental health began to crumble under the pressure. She became depressed and isolated, avoiding friends and family. Lisa tried to help, sensing something was deeply wrong, but Sarah was too ashamed to admit the full extent of her situation. The once vibrant and confident woman was now a shadow of herself, haunted by her choices and their consequences. Tom's suspicion grew as Sarah's behavior became more erratic. Driven by worry and doubt, he started investigating. One night, when Sarah was in the shower, he went through her phone and found the incriminating messages. The puzzle pieces fell into place, and the realization of what had been happening hit him like a ton of bricks. Furious and heartbroken, Tom confronted Sarah. The scene was explosive, filled with shouting and tears. Sarah, cornered and broken, confessed everything. The betrayal cut deep, and Tom's face contorted with a mixture of rage and anguish. Unable to process the extent of the deception and humiliation, he left the house, slamming the door behind him. With Tom gone, the frat guys sensed Sarah's increased vulnerability. Their demands escalated, becoming more dangerous and humiliating. Sarah was forced into situations that eroded her dignity and self-worth, each encounter leaving her more hollow and desperate. The web of deceit and blackmail tightened, leaving her feeling completely trapped and isolated, with no end in sight. The spiral of degradation continued, each day blurring into the next, as Sarah struggled to maintain a semblance of normalcy while her world crumbled around her. The once simple dare had unraveled her life, leaving her entangled in a web of deceit, blackmail, and despair, with no clear way out. Sarah's life had become a living nightmare. Every waking moment was consumed by the constant fear of exposure and the relentless demands of her blackmailers. She was on edge, trying to juggle the demands of Steve and Jake with the facade of her normal life. Every interaction, every casual conversation, felt like a test she was bound to fail. The frat guys escalated their control over her, pushing boundaries with each encounter. One night, they forced her into acts in public places, the humiliation and fear amplifying her despair. The knowledge that anyone could see, that her degradation could become even more public, was a special kind of torture. Sarah felt her hope slipping away, replaced by a cold, numbing dread. Word of the video had spread among the students, and Sarah began to receive unwanted attention. Whispers followed her through the hallways, and she was ridiculed and harassed by those who had seen the footage. Her reputation was in tatters, and the respect she once commanded had vanished. The students' sneers and the faculty's pitying glances became a daily torment. Desperation clawed at her, and Sarah tried to negotiate with Steve and Jake, begging them to stop. They laughed in her face, relishing her humiliation and increasing their demands. Sarah felt completely powerless, a pawn in their cruel game. Her attempts at reasoning, at appealing to any shred of humanity they might have, were met with cold, merciless eyes. Her breaking point came in a moment of sheer exhaustion and despair. The idea of going to the police crossed her mind, but the fear of scandal and the potential impact on Tom's career held her back. The thought of further ruining his life because of her actions was unbearable. She felt trapped in a cycle of degradation with no escape. Amidst this darkness, Sarah found an unexpected ally in a student named Emma. Emma had also been victimized by the frat guys and understood the depths of Sarah's plight. Together, they formed a fragile alliance, bound by their shared trauma and the desire to take control of their lives again. Emma was resourceful and determined, traits that Sarah had long since thought extinguished in herself. They began to plot a way to expose the blackmailers without destroying their own lives completely. The idea was risky, filled with potential pitfalls, but it offered a glimmer of hope in the darkness. They decided to gather evidence against the frat guys, using hidden cameras to record the next encounter. It was a dangerous plan, but the only one that could turn the tables on their tormentors. Sarah and Emma meticulously prepared, ensuring the cameras were well hidden and functional. The night of the plan's execution arrived. Sarah's heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. She met with Steve and Jake, pretending to comply with their latest degrading demands. Emma was nearby, ready to record everything. The encounter was harrowing, but Sarah clung to the hope that this would be the turning point. As the hidden cameras captured the frat guy's actions and words, Sarah felt a strange mix of dread and empowerment. This was her chance to reclaim some semblance of control over her life, to fight back against those who had tormented her. The risk was immense, but so was the potential for liberation. In the depths of her nightmare, Sarah found a flicker of resistance. The descent into darkness had given her a glimmer of light, and she was determined to seize it, no matter the cost. The web of deceit and blackmail had pushed her to the brink, but it had also revealed an inner strength she hadn't known she possessed. The motel room was dimly lit, its shabby furniture and stained carpets adding to the aura of despair. Sarah's hands trembled as she set up the hidden cameras, her mind a whirlwind of fear and determination. Emma was nearby, waiting in a car, ready to call for help if things went wrong. The weight of their plan hung heavily on her shoulders. As the hours dragged on, Sarah's anxiety grew. The room felt suffocating, the silence oppressive. Then, the dreaded knock on the door. Steve and Jake entered, their presence instantly making the room feel smaller. They were ready to continue their abuse, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was the moment she had been preparing for. She went through with the encounter, every degrading act, ensuring everything was captured on camera. The humiliation was unbearable, but she clung to the hope that this would be the turning point. After what felt like an eternity, Steve and Jake left, satisfied and unsuspecting. Sarah waited until she was sure they were gone before collapsing on the bed, her body shaking with sobs. Emma rushed in, comforting her before they quickly gathered the hidden cameras and left the motel. Back at Emma's apartment, they reviewed the footage. It was all there, clear evidence of Steve and Jake's actions and words. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and dread. They had what they needed to go to the police, but they knew they had to be careful about how they presented it. They decided to seek advice from Dr. Williams, a trusted professor known for his integrity and fairness. When Sarah and Emma approached him, he was shocked by their story but agreed to help them navigate the legal and academic ramifications. His support was a beacon of hope in their dark situation. Dr. Williams arranged a meeting with the college administration. Sarah and Emma presented their evidence, detailing the abuse and blackmail they had endured. The administration, initially stunned, agreed to handle the situation discreetly to avoid a scandal. They promised to support Sarah and Emma while ensuring justice was served. The police were brought in, and Steve and Jake were arrested. The news spread quickly, causing a stir within the college community. The frat house was shut down, and investigations began into other potential abuses. Sarah felt a sense of relief but knew the fight wasn't over. The road to justice and healing was long and fraught with challenges. The college community was in shock. Reactions were mixed. Some harassed Sarah, blaming her for the scandal, while others supported her bravery in standing up to her abusers. The fallout was intense, with emotions running high on all sides. Sarah's marriage with Tom remained in shambles. The betrayal and humiliation were too much for him to bear, and their relationship had become a tense and painful existence. Tom's anger and hurt were palpable, and Sarah struggled with her own guilt and shame. Despite the turmoil, Sarah found strength in the support of those who believed in her. She and Emma continued to work together, helping other victims come forward and advocating for stricter policies to protect students from similar abuses. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah's life slowly began to stabilize. The nightmare she had lived through left deep scars, but it also revealed an inner strength she hadn't known she possessed. The journey ahead was daunting, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. The fight was far from over, and Sarah knew there would be more battles to face. But she was no longer a passive victim. She was determined to reclaim her life and ensure that justice was served, not just for herself but for all those who had suffered in silence. The descent into darkness had been brutal, but it had also sparked a fierce resilience within her, one that would carry her through the trials to come. Tom's sudden return home was like a thunderclap, shattering the fragile semblance of peace Sarah had been clinging to. He stormed into the house, his face a mask of fury and hurt. Sarah's heart sank as she realized there was no escaping the confrontation. "Sarah, I need answers now." Tom's voice was a raw edge of pain. "What the hell has been going on?" Sarah's mouth went dry. She had known this moment was coming, but nothing could have prepared her for the intensity of it. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Tom took a step closer, his eyes burning with betrayal. "I knew something was off," he continued, his voice trembling with emotion. "I found the messages, the video. I knew more than I let on. How could you do this to me? To us?" The confrontation was explosive, a torrent of raw emotions and painful admissions. Sarah confessed everything, her voice breaking as she recounted the blackmail, the degradation, the helplessness she had felt. Tom's face contorted with a mixture of rage and sorrow. He felt betrayed not just by Sarah, but by the entire college community that had kept such secrets. As the days passed, the tension in the house was suffocating. Then, a new nightmare emerged. Steve, out on bail, made one last desperate attempt to blackmail Sarah. He threatened to release more videos, more explicit and damaging than the first. The message sent a chill down Sarah's spine, but it also sparked a resolve within her. She decided to confront Steve one final time. This time, she chose a public place, surrounded by friends and supporters who knew the situation. The tension was palpable as she approached him, her heart pounding in her chest. Steve's smug confidence faltered when he saw the crowd. Sarah, with newfound courage, called the police. They arrived swiftly, arresting Steve again, this time with no chance of escape. Just when she thought she could finally breathe, another revelation struck. Sarah discovered that another video, more explicit and damaging, was still out there. The realization hit her like a sledgehammer. Someone else within the frat had been keeping secrets, and the nightmare was far from over. With Emma's help, Sarah began a relentless search for the source of the video. They delved into the dark underbelly of the frat house's activities, uncovering a hidden network of frat members involved in similar blackmail schemes. The more they uncovered, the more monstrous the operation seemed. Determined to end the cycle of abuse, Sarah and Emma gathered all their evidence and prepared to expose the entire network. They contacted a journalist willing to tell their story, hoping to bring the whole operation down. The process was harrowing, but Sarah felt a sense of grim determination. The story went public, causing a massive scandal. The college administration was forced to take drastic measures. Several frat members were expelled or arrested, and the frat house was permanently shut down. The community was rocked to its core, and the fallout was immense. Sarah, though battered and scarred, stood at the center of the storm she had unleashed. Her marriage with Tom was still in shambles, but she had found a fierce resolve within herself. The journey had been brutal, and the end was far from happy, but Sarah knew she had reclaimed a part of herself that had been lost in the darkness. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt she could face whatever came next. The fallout from the exposé was immediate and immense. The campus was abuzz with gossip, rumors, and intense debate. Sarah faced backlash from many in the community who viewed her actions as bringing shame to the college. Whispered insults and outright hostility became part of her daily life. Yet, amidst the sea of animosity, she found unexpected pockets of support. Some students and faculty members lauded her bravery in standing up to the corruption and abuse. The legal battle that ensued was grueling. Sarah and Emma were thrust into a whirlwind of courtroom scenes filled with graphic details and emotional testimonies. The intense scrutiny of the trial weighed heavily on them. Sarah recounted every painful detail, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Emma's testimony was equally harrowing, painting a vivid picture of the frat house's dark underbelly. Finally, the verdict came in. The frat members were found guilty on multiple counts of blackmail, abuse, and coercion. The college was ordered to implement strict measures to prevent such incidents in the future. There was a brief, bitter satisfaction in seeing justice served, but Sarah knew this was only one part of the battle. The case became a media sensation. Sarah was thrust into the spotlight, facing both support and condemnation. The media frenzy took a toll on her, amplifying the strain in her personal life. Every aspect of her story was dissected, analyzed, and debated in public forums. She felt like she was living under a microscope, every move scrutinized by an unforgiving audience. The community's reaction was a mixed bag. While some hailed her as a hero, others saw her as a pariah. The tension was palpable everywhere she went. Hallways that once felt familiar now felt hostile, and she never knew if she would encounter support or scorn. In the midst of this chaos, Sarah found an unexpected ally in Dr. Green, a professor who had been advocating for women's rights. He offered her emotional support and helped her navigate the relentless media storm. His guidance provided a much-needed anchor, a steady hand in a turbulent sea. Tom's family learned about the scandal and placed the blame squarely on Sarah. They pressured Tom to leave her, further straining their already fragile marriage. The constant pressure from his family made Sarah feel isolated and abandoned. The home they once shared felt like a battleground, filled with unspoken accusations and lingering resentment. As if the media scrutiny and family conflict weren't enough, Sarah began receiving anonymous threats, both online and in person. The messages were filled with venomous hatred, making her increasingly paranoid and fearful for her safety. Emma and Dr. Green were instrumental in helping her report these threats to the police, providing a small measure of security. An unexpected ally emerged from within the frat house, a former member who had been coerced into participating in the abuse. This ally contacted Sarah, offering crucial information that could expose even more corruption within the fraternity. The revelation was shocking, but it also provided a glimmer of hope. Sarah and Emma arranged a secret meeting with this ally. The clandestine rendezvous was filled with tension and anticipation. The former frat member handed over a trove of evidence and names of other victims. This information became the key to dismantling the entire network of corruption and abuse that had festered within the fraternity for years. As Sarah walked away from the meeting, clutching the evidence that could finally bring down her tormentors, she felt a complex mix of emotions. The journey had been brutal, and the end was far from happy, but she had found a fierce resolve within herself. The fight was not over, but for the first time, she felt a sense of control over her destiny. The full scope of the abuse within the fraternity began to reveal itself in grim detail. As Sarah and Emma gathered more testimonies from other victims, it became clear that the rot extended far beyond what they had initially thought. The sheer number of stories and the patterns of coercion and blackmail painted a horrifying picture of a systemic problem. Driven by the urgency of their discovery, Sarah and Emma worked tirelessly to compile a compelling case against the fraternity's leadership. The weight of the evidence was overwhelming, but it also strengthened their resolve. They knew they were fighting not just for themselves, but for all the other victims who had suffered in silence. With the new evidence in hand, they approached the police. The authorities conducted a raid on the fraternity house, uncovering a trove of incriminating documents and videos. The sheer volume of the material left no doubt about the extent of the abuse. The house was shut down permanently, and more arrests followed, sweeping through the fraternity like a cleansing fire. Under immense public and legal pressure, the college administration was forced to enact sweeping reforms. Policies were overhauled, and new support systems were put in place to protect students from similar incidents in the future. Sarah and Emma's advocacy had sparked a revolution, but the fight had left its scars. Amidst the chaos, Sarah and Emma started a support group for victims of sexual abuse on campus. The group provided a safe space for others to share their stories, to find solidarity and support. It became a beacon of hope for many, a place where healing could begin. Sarah's courage and resilience caught the public's attention, and she was invited to speak at various events about her experience. She became a reluctant but powerful voice for change, using her platform to highlight the importance of standing up against abuse. Each speech was a step toward reclaiming her power, but it also reminded her of the painful journey she had endured. Despite her public success, Sarah's marriage with Tom continued to suffer. The strain of the past events lingered between them like a ghost, haunting their every interaction. They attended couples therapy, but the damage seemed irreparable. The tension was a constant undercurrent, eroding the foundations of their relationship. The breaking point came when Tom gave Sarah an ultimatum: to leave the past behind and focus on rebuilding their life together or to part ways. It was a moment of stark reality, forcing Sarah to confront the path her life had taken. She was torn between her commitment to her husband and her new role as an advocate. During a quiet evening alone, Sarah had a moment of clarity. The journey had been excruciating, but it had also been one of personal growth and empowerment. She realized that her fight had transformed her, revealing a strength she never knew she possessed. It was time to prioritize her well-being and future, to embrace the person she had become. With a heavy heart, Sarah made her decision. She told Tom that she needed to continue her advocacy work, to stand by the victims who looked to her for inspiration. Their paths had diverged too much to find common ground. The separation was painful, but it was a necessary step toward healing for both of them. As Sarah looked ahead, she knew the journey was far from over. The fight against abuse and corruption would continue, but she was ready to face it with the same fierce determination that had carried her through the darkest times. She had found her voice, and she intended to use it to create a better world for others. In the aftermath of the chaos, Sarah stood on the brink of a new chapter. The past had left its scars, but it had also forged her into a warrior. The unraveling of her old life had given birth to a new purpose, one that she embraced with unwavering resolve. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the small cafe where Sarah and Tom sat, facing each other. The air was thick with unspoken words, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. Sarah took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "Tom, I want to thank you for everything," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Your support meant the world to me, but I think we both know that our paths have diverged too much to continue together." Tom nodded, his eyes sad but understanding. "I've felt it too. We've both changed so much. I think it's time we let each other go and find our own ways forward." They parted amicably, both saddened and relieved. The finality of their decision brought a sense of closure, allowing them to move on from the tangled web of their past. Sarah's new apartment was small but cozy, a symbol of her fresh start. As she unpacked boxes and arranged her belongings, she felt a mix of fear and excitement about the future. Embracing her independence, she also embraced the newfound strength that had carried her through the darkest times. Dr. Green and other supportive faculty members helped Sarah transition into a new role at the college. She continued her advocacy work, channeling her experiences into helping others while also rebuilding her professional life. The support from her colleagues provided a solid foundation on which she could stand. One afternoon, Sarah ran into Mike, the student who had first welcomed her at that fateful party. He looked older, more mature, and guilt was written all over his face. "Sarah, I'm so sorry for not stepping in to help you that night," he said, his voice sincere. They had a candid conversation, and Mike offered to help with her advocacy efforts. It was a surprising turn of events, but Sarah welcomed the support, recognizing that allies could come from unexpected places. A year later, a major news outlet ran a follow-up story on Sarah, highlighting the changes at the college and her role in them. The piece was a vindication of her efforts and a bittersweet reminder of her journey. Seeing her story in print, Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions but ultimately a sense of pride in what she had accomplished. The sentencing of Steve and Jake brought a sense of closure. They were handed lengthy prison terms, and Sarah attended the sentencing, watching as justice was served. A weight lifted off her shoulders, the ghosts of the past finally laid to rest. The support group that Sarah and Emma started had grown, becoming a significant force on campus. They expanded their efforts to other colleges, spreading awareness and support for abuse victims. The network provided a safe haven for those who had suffered, fostering a sense of community and solidarity. Reflecting on her journey, Sarah felt a deep sense of accomplishment and purpose. Despite the pain and loss, she had emerged stronger, driven by a mission to make a difference. Her legacy was one of resilience and empowerment, a beacon of hope for others. At a conference for advocates, Sarah met someone new. Their connection was immediate, built on mutual respect and an understanding of each other's pasts. The relationship started slowly, each step taken with care and consideration, but it held the promise of something meaningful and lasting. Standing at the edge of a new chapter in her life, Sarah felt empowered by her experiences. The journey had been arduous, filled with moments of despair and triumph, but she had emerged stronger, ready to face whatever came next. She knew her story was far from over, but now, she was the author of her own destiny. The future was hers to shape, and she stepped into it with unwavering